Greetings, microscopists! I have just returned from M&M 2024 in Cleveland.
Yeah, still Cleveland,
Ohio, and I've got lots to share with you. I'm sorry if this will be a little long, but I've got a lot to cover. And if I get anything wrong, and I probably definitely will, I invite everyone to correct me in the comments. Thank you! None of this video is sponsored. I was not paid to say anything or look at anything or review anything. All the bad opinions are probably someone else's. Now, if you stay until the end, I'll talk about some of the cool swag I got. The talks. I didn't really have any time to attend any of the talks because I was running my rear end off like a maniac trying to get videos filmed and stuff and whatever. But I will tell you about what I know were the hot topics there this year. Of course, there was a ton of talk about AI and automation and all different kinds of data processing. But the hottest topic of them all was 4D STEM. This is the current bandwagon everyone appears to be jumping on, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean 4D STEM is drawing all the eyeballs right now. 4D STEM is the stuff.
the stuff.
I'm not sure what the attendance was or if it was up or down from last year, but I can say that the level of engagement I saw from the attendees towards the vendors was very high. Even Thursday morning, which under normal circumstances is considered a very sleepy time on the show floor, there was a good amount of activity. Major vendors! Now on to the major microscope vendors and what they are doing. I'll try to go in alphabetical order so there is no bias. I'm sorry, Zeiss, that is just the way it goes. Hitachi had a number of instruments on the floor, both in their booth and in other people's booths. In their own booth, they had an SU8700 ultra-high-resolution Schottky SEM, an SU3900 SE, and an R-Blade ion mill. They also had an HT7800 Temm stem in the AMT booth, and an SU5000 Schottky system in the Oxford booth. Joel had an IT710, an IT810 SEMs, and the new 120i Temm stem. Joel gave me an interview about the 120i. I'll be dropping it hopefully very soon. They also had a tabletop in their booth, Tabletop SEM. But we'll talk about tabletop separately here in a bit. And now if I missed anything there, like if there's something hidden somewhere that I missed, please let me know. TestScan had two instruments, a Kamarra ultra-high resolution SEM and their brand new plasma fib, the Amber. TestScan gave me an interview about the Amber. However, they requested that if they do not like the video, that I will not release it. Now, because I wanted to be a nice guy, I agreed to that. So we'll find out in the near future if we get to see it or not. Update, as I've been going through my files preliminarily, getting ready to start editing them all, I've found that I've maybe lost a few things. Maybe they fell out of the airplane on my way home. Basically, I've lost the video portion of the TestScan interview, as long as one other interview, but I still have the audio. So I'm not sure if I can make that work or not. I'll be checking with TestScan and seeing what we can do. But, short answer is we probably won't be seeing that interview. Thermo Fisher did basically what they did last year, only harder. Last year they had one small tungsten SEM in their booth. This time they only had a tabletop SEM in their booth. They instead of instruments had a number of rooms set up for people to view instrument demos remotely. Now we'll talk more about that in a moment. Lastly, Zeiss was also set up the same as they were last year, with no electron microscopes in their booth, and instead only two remote viewing stations. Now, they did have an SEM in the Oxford booth, but unfortunately I didn't write down the model number, so I apologize to Zeiss, and if anybody can put that info down in the comments, that would be super. Okay, so there are a few things here that we can talk about. You may ask yourself why some companies bring instruments to the show and why some don't. Now, I don't know the exact reasons or rationale behind coming to a conference like this and not bringing any instruments with you, but there are some things we might speculate about. Uninstalling a demo microscope, packing it up, shipping it to a conference, unpacking it, installing it on the show floor, then uninstalling it, packing it up, shipping it back to your office, unpacking it, and then reinstalling it in your office is a lot of work and costs a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. For example, if I, as brand X, decided not to bring 4 microscopes to this conference and instead did everything virtually, I'd probably just save myself a minimum of $200,000. I mean, minimum. So I've saved myself some money. You might ask then, won't that cost you customers down the road? And that is a question that I, as the vice president of Brand X Microscopes, will need to answer for myself. It could be that I, as Brand X, feel secure enough in my place in the market that I don't need to have people come and sit down and demo my microscopes. That is a possible rationale. Another might be that at Brand X, I don't see the benefit of spending that money in that way. Perhaps I think that $200,000 spent on travel by my sales team is more effective at making sales than microscopes at a conference will be. Those are just 2 possibilities from the vendor's point of view. There may be others. Now, what about this trend? And yes, I'm calling it a trend now because I am a real trend-setting guy. What can we say about this trend from the customer's point of view? Now, I did hear some attendees at the show express their opinions about this remote demo on the show floor trend. They didn't like it. What I heard was remote demos can be done from literally anywhere. You could stay in your bed at home and get a remote demo on almost any piece of equipment you want the world over. So why would anyone want to travel all the way across the country or even from Europe or Asia to speak with an instrument manufacturer only to then be offered a remote demo? This is the type of thing that I heard some people saying. Now, vendors love it, but I haven't heard a single customer say anything positive about it. But am I wrong? Let me know what you guys think about remote demos at a conference in the comments. New vendors, one of the really interesting thing about this particular conference was the very large number of new electron microscope manufacturers that were there. If not for the first time, then they were relatively new. Now, a lot of these will just be tabletop SEMs, but not all of them. And so because there are a lot of tabletop SEMs involved in this category, I want to give a little background info about the tabletop market before we get into this. Tabletop SEMs have been around since the 1970s. They're intended to be smaller, less expensive, but also much less capable instruments. Their resolution was generally not great. Maybe they only went up to 20 kilovolts. Maybe they only had a BSE detector. They had no SE detector. Maybe they had to use only manual stages. You know, they're traditionally a step up from a light microscope, but not a real replacement for a full-sized SEM. Basically a low-cost SEM for lower-end microscope work. In the early 2010s, this market suddenly exploded with everyone and their uncle trying to sell one, but very few of them, even from the big manufacturers, were able to make a solid and reliable instrument that did what people expected from it. So fairly quickly, all these independent companies crashed and burned pretty hard, and the big guys ended up often completely redesigning their tabletops to be more in line with what customers wanted. However, Thermo Fisher did come out with the Phenom, which is still technically a tabletop, but it is much larger than other traditional tabletop SEMs, and it has become very popular. Fast forward to today, and we've got an influx of a whole bunch of this new type of extra large tabletop SEMs. A lot of these go up to 30 kilovolts. They mostly have movable apertures, motorized stages, ports to fit a whole slew of accessories. They're a very different animal than the standard, very limited tabletop SEM of the recent past. These mega tabletops are a real attempt at replacing full-sized tungsten SEMs. Now, this is just some background info on tabletop SEMs, but it brings us now to all the new instrument manufacturers in South Korea. So first, we have COSEM which has been in the country for about 2 years now, being distributed and supported by JH Technologies here in the United States. They started off with just a tabletop and have since introduced a tabletop that can accept a Bruker EBSD detector. That was a big deal a year ago. They now have a small full-sized tungsten filament SEM. They were at the show and they had those things on display. I've interviewed them in years past, but not this year. EM Crafts, which is distributed by Electron Optics Instruments here in the United States, have a large tabletop called the Cube 2. On their website, they also offer some full-size tungsten systems. I did an interview with them at the show and had a quick look at the instrument, so keep an eye out for that. SEC, which is distributed by Nano Images in the US and SciMed in the UK, had another interesting large tabletop. They really wanted to highlight the different accessories they have installed on their systems, like EBSD, EBIC, Raman, and several others. I interviewed them about it, so stay tuned. Lastly at the show, there was Saron Technologies. They declined my invitation for an interview, so I'm afraid I wasn't able to get much information about their company or products. I'm also completely unable to view their website from any device or browser that I've tried. All I can say is that they were formed in the year 2000. They have a tabletop, tungsten, and Schottky SEMs for sale, and they look like this. They have no instruments at the show. I don't know who's distributing in the US or what their plan is for the market here. I guess we will just have to wait and find out. And so on top of those 4 companies, I know of at least one other manufacturer from South Korea that is likely looking to enter the US market with a tabletop, tungsten, and Schottky SEM. From my view, that is a lot of competition over the tabletop/tungsten SEM market, because don't forget that the 5 major EM manufacturers also all have instruments that are competing in this space and are also well established. So it will be interesting to see how this all shakes out over the next 5 years or so. Now, to add some spice to the flame, we also have Chinese manufacturers attempting to enter the US market, 2 of which were at this show. CQTe, also pronounced SICTech or CQTe, are based in China and have a full range of EM instruments. At their booth, they were advertising a tungsten SEM with a through-the-lens detector, which is crazy, an ultra-high-resolution Schottky SEM. I think it might have had a Gemini-type boosting column. I probably should have asked a question about that. But they also have a dual-beam fib and a field emission 120 kilovolt TEM. So on top of that, they did also mention to me that they had a number of other different instruments in the works that were yet or soon to be released. They already have a distributor here in the United States and have a plan to open an office here within the next year or so. So it's very clear that they mean business and are very aggressive. They have a lot of hurdles to overcome in the market, but we'll see what happens. They were very friendly and gave me an interview, so subscribe to see it when it comes out. The other Chinese manufacturer on the floor was Zep Tools, and they were showing off one of their 3 models of tabletop SEM. It seems they also make a range of in-situ tools for TEM and SEM, like nano indenters and heating holders and etc. I was not able to get an interview with them, so I don't have much else to share, like who is distributing their products here in the US, etc. Special products. Okay, I'd like to switch gears a little bit here and tell you about a few products that I saw that I thought were really interesting. Now, keep in mind that I didn't have the opportunity to speak with everyone and look at everything. I'm 100%, I'm missing a couple of really cool things here, I'm sure. My brain was already overflowing to exploding from all the people I spoke with, and it was full and could not accept any more information. But these were just the things that grabbed my attention for whatever reason. Now, I'm not endorsing anyone or their products. I just thought that these were interesting, and maybe you will too. In no particular order, from the University of Oregon, there was the Noble Dome. This is a sealed transfer station for air-sensitive samples that fits on the side of an SEM or a fib. And you can see from this picture that it was originally designed to fit on the side of a thermofib. But the interface could be modified to fit on other types of instruments. That is a cool idea. Most of the EM manufacturers will have some sort of air protection transfer system for their own instruments, but most of them are fairly expensive. So if transferring samples in an air-free environment into an SEM or FIB is a problem you need to overcome, maybe you could take a look at this. I have an interview with them, and it is coming out soon. Point Electronic, who have the best knobs in the business, have just come out with a TEM scan or STEM scan controller. They said they had received a huge response from customers at the conference about it, mainly having to do with its application in 4D STEM. No surprise. Apparently, most, if not all, of the big manufacturers have kind of black boxed their scan controls, making good 4D STEM results very difficult to obtain. This should allow users to more finely control their scans in the TEM or STEM for doing that 4D STEM work. I mentioned last year that I heard about compressed sensing. Compressed sensing is this wild idea of scanning a sample, like an SEM, a STEM, an AFM, whatever, with a minimal and fairly random beam and collecting a very high noise, very low signal image, and then reconstructing the 80 or 90% of the image with some special hardware and software. This reduces any beam dosage to the sample and massively speeds up any acquisition. I said last year that this sounded completely insane, and I wasn't sure what would happen with it. Well, a company called Sense AI out of the UK were there on the floor with their own compressed sensing product. So if compressed sensing sounds interesting to you, maybe look them up. Wraith America last year debuted this totally wild triple ion source column. It's the single column and 3 ions come off of the filament simultaneously, and then by biasing, one of the coils in the column, you're able to only get one of those ion streams to hit your sample, and so you could switch between them very quickly. Totally wild. Crazy stuff. But this year they introduced the Ion Master microscope, which uses ions not only for fabrication, but also for imaging. The interview I did with them was also kind of wacky, especially when I kind of insulted the original helium ion microscope from years past that was made by a different company. And one of the guys I was interviewing had actually worked on it. So I looked kind of like a huge jerk. I'll probably edit that out of the interview. Anyway, the Ion Master looks like some really fascinating new technology. Mel Build has an interesting new do-it-all TEM holder. It was an air protection, heating, cooling, electrical throughput, do-everything holder. So instead of buying multiple different holders for different jobs, this one holder will probably handle most of the in-situ experiments you might want to do. Interview coming soon. One of the bigger product announcements this year was the JUL120i Temm Stem. I have an interview coming out on it very soon, but I can give you a quick rundown on its features. Obviously, it's small, with all the pumps and everything contained inside this box. It has a completely oilless vacuum system and can be fitted with either a tungsten or Lab 6 filament. And when I say oilless vacuum system, I mean all the pumps are inside the box. Nothing is outside of it. The only wires coming out the back of it are for power, for cooling water, and like a compressed air or nitrogen or something like that. So there is also a high contrast and a high resolution version, and they had some very interesting remote operation controls in the GUI that I thought were pretty cool. I'm quite positive that it is going to be a huge seller for JEOL. I had a demo on it, and I would say that it is fine. It didn't blow my skirt up too high, but it was no slouch either. I'm not a big TEM guy, so I might have been concerned about, the wrong things, and you will need to form your own opinions. Sorry. I did already mention about the SEC Tabletop SEMs being distributed by Nano Images and all the crazy accessories they had going on those instruments. For example, if you just needed to do Raman spectroscopy and you didn't have a need for a full-sized SEM, this is maybe something you could look at. IBSS had a new feature on their portable downstream plasma cleaning system. They had a new attachment that allowed a TEM rod to be inserted for cleaning and then removed while the system was running and under vacuum. It was a very simple design and could be expanded to hold and clean up to 9 TEM rods simultaneously, with the ability to remove or insert any of them at any time without breaking the vacuum. A German company called Kamarra Device had a neat little motorized air protection transfer device for SEM or FIB. You could put your sample in it under argon or nitrogen in a glove box, close the little door, and then install it on your SEM stage, and then remotely open it under vacuum. I just thought it was kind of cool. HBAR Instruments had some neat TEM grids and this wild liquid helium TEM holder available. The holder was designed in a special way to reduce vibrations from the liquid helium, allowing for better resolution. Lastly, this company called SGlass, which is kind of like spyglass, but without the P. So it's more like, I think it's more like science glass, SGlass, but science spelled with a Y, SGlass. Anyway, they had a fascinating piece of software that allowed the importation of 3D datasets into a VR space. They said that seeing these structures using your own stereoscopic vision might allow some users to find new things that they weren't detecting simply viewing the data on a 2D screen. I just thought it was pretty rad. Check out my interview when it debuts and you can see them using the software. It looks cool. Okay, lastly, I did bring home a few pieces of Swiggity swag items. Of course, as usual, there were tons of pens and mostly other useless things there. Lots of bags, which I mostly avoided. Now, I may not have gotten all the best stuff, like Hitachi was giving out sock monkeys, but this is what I ended up with. I got some of these cool grids from HBAR Instruments. You probably can't see it on camera, but each grid is individually numbered and is readable with the naked eye. I'm sure other people have made similar grids before. I just think this was pretty cool. CQTe gave me this cute little SEM keychain guy that's also a flash drive. Is kind of cute. I'm not sure how much cocaine and LSD Quantum Design puts into these cookies, but they are amazing. And if you ever see them out at the show, grab some, you will not regret it. Lastly is this flash drive from Hitachi, and it's about the most special flash drive I've ever seen. The cap is solid metal. I think it's copper coated with something shiny, and the other end is solid crystal with the logo laser etched into it. I mean, I'd be afraid to just put regular old data on this thing. I feel like it can only keep something like nuclear launch codes on it or something. Anyway, I turned out 4 daily videos at MSA while I was there. I'll leave a link in the description of where you can find those. I'll start turning out the interviews that I did very soon. I mostly have to wait on the vendors to send me data or images to use in the video, but as soon as I get those, boom, they can go out. I am very exhausted, but I had a great time. This was a great conference. I got to meet a bunch of new people and say hi to some old friends. I'm not sure where I'll be headed to next, but give me some suggestions in the comments of where I should attend. Make sure to share this around with all your microscope buddies, and I'll see you around the lab.